forum about the library project. I'm Maureen Amyot, the Library Director here at the Westborough Public Library. We're a small group tonight, but I'm glad you're all here to hear about our project. So before we get into kind of the floor plans and the details, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the background for the project and a little bit about the library itself too. So the Westborough Public Library started as a cooperative library society that was founded by a group of residents in 1773. So we've been around for a while. The library evolved during that time period and eventually turned the book collection over to the town in 1857 and elected its first board of trustees. 10 years later, the town hall was remodeled and included space for the library. Use of library grew, and along with the book collection, and by the early 1900s, the library had outgrown its space in town hall. So land was purchased where we are currently sitting at the corner of Parkman and West Main Streets in 1906 for $5,000. Can you imagine? I mean, in 1906 dollars, that was probably a ton of money. And then private donations of $44,860 paid for the cost of building and equipping the new 10,000 square foot library. The population in town at the time was 5,400. We're now just slightly over 21,000. So in 1977, the library trustees recognized the need for an expanded library facility, and town meeting funded design and development plans for an addition on the existing site. The 1978 town meeting voted $1.2 million to build the two-story addition we are in that would centralize library services on 2 floors, and it was accessible by ramp and by elevator. The new library addition increased the building to 20,076 square feet, and it was dedicated in February of 1981. So you may be wondering why now, and why are we proposing a renovation now? Since 1980, Westborough's population has increased 36%. And you may have heard at town meeting and at other meetings or read in articles that our growth is currently in a bubble. And that bubble is kind of going to peak in the 2020s and then level off. It'll still continue to go up slightly and should level off around 2035. So realizing that we needed to make some changes to serve the town's increasing population, the library trustees hired a consultant in 2012 to conduct a needs assessment to begin planning for the future. Her study revealed that the current building could no longer effectively accommodate the services, wishes, and needs of the community, nor would it be able to do so in the future. It showed that the library was undersized to serve its community as a thriving 21st century public library, and it became clear that the library needed either expansion or a new facility to adequately serve Westborough into the future. Something else that happened in this time period is that the way people use libraries and the services they want and expect have changed dramatically since the 1980s. We provide all of these services you see here, loaning things like snowshoes and Wi-Fi hotspots. We have downloadable and streaming content. We offer notary services. We do home delivery of materials for patrons who can't get to us, and so much more. We applied for a grant for planning and design from our state agency, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, in 2014 and started work on a new plan. When the plan was complete, the MBLC announced a new round of construction grants. We were notified in July of 2017 that our application was successful, but we were placed at number 11 on a prioritized list for grant funds. We were awarded our grant finally on July 7th. And we now have 6 months to gain local approval of the project. We expect that vote to take place at the October 17th town meeting. And we hope you'll all come. This slide is showing you, is a graphic to show you the space deficiencies in the current building, with the existing areas in gray and the proposed additional space needed in red. And it's not to make you squint and read tiny words, but just to show you how much additional space is needed in the building. The biggest needs are in the children's spaces, the teen area, meeting spaces, local history, and staff support spaces. So our proposed project calls for demolition of the 1980 addition and a small portion of the rear of the 1908 building. A new 3-story addition will be added, starting about 3 feet lower than the current addition, so that floors in all of the levels will match. And so updated mechanical systems can be installed. Right now, there's not enough distance from floor to the floor below us to the floor here to install the updated systems that we need. The historic character of the building will be preserved and woven into the addition, since this is a significant building in the West Main Street Historic District. So this slide gives you kind of an aerial view of our existing building. The dotted line is the property line. The Congregational Church is above, and the Forbes building is the gray block up below. This slide shows an aerial view of the proposed addition that features a new entrance, a new side entrance, I should say, and courtyard space outdoors. I also want to mention this is our original drawing from 2016, and the architects just in the last few months have been working on new revised plans, which I don't have the graphics for yet because they're still working on them, but they have adjusted the design to a little bit. So some of the things you see here are very preliminary, and a lot of what you see, especially as we look at floor plans together, is changing even as we speak. But this will just kind of give you an idea of what direction that we're kind of headed in. So this was one first possible option for the lower level. This new plan has a larger meeting room that can hold 64 people, that would be dividable, and that would include storage for chairs and tables, which is something that we don't currently have. A new, much larger teen space would be located on this level with some of the adult collection, plus seating and computers. Right now, the teen space that we have, that you can see if you entered through the West Main Street door, was to your left, one of the small rooms in the front, and is one of the areas that you saw in the previous slide that is very space deficient. So a new, larger teen space, and we've heard for years and years on our community surveys and from using it ourselves that our meeting room, people say, feels like a dungeon. There are no windows in it, so and it does need to be bigger. Right now it can only hold 40 people. The new building, it will hold 64.
So the lower level, that's where the children's library.
That's where the children's department is now, yes. This slide shows a concept for the main floor where we are now. Staff workspace would be located here in this drawing, in the space currently occupied by part of the adult fiction, our local history area, and the circulation desk, just to give you kind of a perspective. Small 2 to 4 person study rooms are added here, along with some space in the top right corner that was originally designated as a digital media lab, but will most likely become additional study rooms or conference room based on feedback from this past spring's community survey. Rest of the adult books and materials are shown here with soft seating and work tables. The front 2 rooms are designated as popular library and periodicals. So popular library is our new materials and high demand items, and periodicals obviously is our newspapers and magazines. This would have comfortable seating like it does now, only there would be more of it. And we also imagine our very popular room of things to be located somewhere in that space. And then the upper level is where our new larger children's room will be located. This will feature a program space, office space for staff, and a workroom for tasks like cataloging and program preparation. The shelves will be much lower than the current shelving, so our staff will have sight lines throughout the whole department. There'll be soft seating, work tables, play tables, and spaces for parents to sit comfortably with their children to read together. And I failed to mention restrooms. There'll be restrooms on every floor in the new building. That's right now we have 2 single-person restrooms on the lower level, and that's it for the public. The new plan calls for at least 2 restrooms on each floor, with a family restroom being an additional space on the top floor where the children's area is. We also envision some type of early literacy area that would feature manipulatives, toys, and other early literacy experiences for our youngest patrons. And I always mention Mr. Rogers when I'm talking about this, because he has the famous quote about play is the work of children, and we want to give our children an appropriate, well-stocked space to do their important work. Another key feature in the design is for the Westborough Center for History and Culture, which is our public space for people to come and research the history of the town, history of their home, and that space needs to be larger than the current space that we have right behind us. There will also be an archival storage space located behind the public space, which will allow us to preserve the treasures of our town for years to come. And we know our project can't afford, won't support an archive like you'd see at the Library of Congress or Harvard, for example, but we need a space that has consistent temperature and humidity year-round so that we can ensure that our most precious documents will exist for the next generations to study. There are some things in that room all the way back to the 1700s, and we want to be able to preserve those. So this is a first very high level, one of the concepts of what the exterior would look like. And I know when we stand on the corner of Parkman and West Main after the ribbon cutting, it's not going to look like this, because the design is going to change, things are going to evolve, but this is kind of a concept. So what the important things are to note here is it will be a 3-story addition in the back. Right now it's a 2-story addition. So right above us is a flat roof. We're on the top of the 2nd story. This will be a full 3-story addition. The roof lines will match. It will be complementary materials. Second, there'll be a lot of windows, especially on the Parkman Street side of the building, to bring in natural light. And that also was a recurring request in our recent community survey. And lastly, there have been many, many requests for an outdoor courtyard or outdoor usable space, especially since COVID, because we pivoted and did a lot of programming as much as we could outdoors during and since COVID. So what we're showing here is an outdoor space, and possibly some outdoor seating, but just a place for people to gather, for us to do programs, presentations, things like that outdoors. And several veterans have also requested that we add a flagpole. So that's present in this rendering as well. And we're pretty sure that's going to make it into the final. This is also a first concept of what a redesigned, renovated children's room could look like. So what you're seeing here is the lower shelves, bright colors, fun furniture, and even shelves that could be tunnels for kids to go through. There's shelving that would allow us to display the books with the covers facing out, so they're easy to browse. There's lots of natural light. There's lots of happy children. And I mentioned earlier some of the early literacy things, so you see some things on the wall, little maps, manipulatives, bead frame type things. But again, when we cut the ribbon and are standing in the children's room, it's probably not going to look anything like this, but this will just kind of give you an idea of sort of what we're thinking. So this is a quick overview of our timeline. And again, not to make you read small print, the Library Building Committee reformed in early 2021, knowing that our grant award was going to be coming this summer. They began meeting in October. We selected a new owner's project manager, or OPM, in January of 2023, and we're continuing with the original architect for the project. They're currently working with the Library Building Committee to update our 2016 cost estimate and to do some minor refining of the design. We expect that cost estimate to come sometime in August. And again, we expect to be at the October town meeting asking for approval of the project. Just like school projects, our grant is a reimbursement grant over 5 years. So we're required to get approval from town meeting for the full amount of the project. And the Board of Library Commissioners reimburses us portions of the $9.4 million each year when we reach specific milestones in the project. So assuming that town meeting approves the project in October, we would begin searching for a temporary location while designers are working on completing the designs. We won't be able to stay in this building because it will eventually become a construction site. We don't know where that is yet, but we will find one and move into that probably summer or fall of '23, with construction beginning shortly thereafter. Construction would take about 2 years, and so that would be done around the end of calendar year 2025. Furniture would arrive, things would get set up, and the ribbon cutting, the party, and the celebrating will take place in the first quarter of 2026. So a little bit about the cost. In 2016, our cost estimate just for the construction portion of the project was $15.89 million. That figure came from our designer, Lamoureux Pagano Architects, and AMF, an independent cost estimator. When you add in the soft costs, like OPM fees, designer fees, contingencies, furniture, landscaping, and so on, the total project cost came to just under $24 million. That figure included 3 years of escalation up to 2019. And that was the basis for our construction grant application to the Board of Library Commissioners. The $9.4 million that we're receiving is approximately 40% of the eligible costs of the project. Not all costs are eligible costs, and if you'd like more information about eligible versus non-eligible, I'll talk to you about that offline. The important thing to note is that the amount of the grant is fixed and will not change even if the cost of the project increases. We also can't use the funds for anything else other than the project as it was approved, which is a renovation and addition on the current site. We can't change our minds and build a new library elsewhere. We can't decide we're only going to fix certain things. It has to be the renovation and addition that we determined that the town needs. There are a few other potential considerations that we'll be keeping in mind related to the cost. The Mass State Historical Commission may require an accessible ramp at the main entry. We're applying for a waiver as part of the project and to designate the Parkman Street entrance as our main entrance. And that side will be fully accessible, as will the entire building. There also have been changes that were released just within the last 2 weeks to the Massachusetts energy codes. And there are efforts to make Westborough more energy efficient through the Climate Action Plan and other green initiatives. We'll take all of those factors into consideration when designing the building and its supporting systems. And then, of course, COVID, which has wreaked havoc on many things, as we know. And we don't yet know the effect of that on our project as it relates to labor force, supply chain, or even vacant space for the temporary library facility. But lastly, some good news. The U.S. Treasury is formulating a coronavirus capital projects fund at the federal level. This program would award funds to the states to invest in local capital projects. One of the allowed uses that we know of already is for libraries. They're specifically called out in the plan. Massachusetts has applied for funding, and we'll hear in the fall of this year, September, October, how much is coming and what they intend to use it for. So we're very hopeful that some of that will be coming to libraries. So just to wrap things up, If we don't do this project now, it will likely be 2029 before the Board of Library Commissioners offers another planning and design grant round, and around 2030 to 2031 for construction grants. If we wait and reapply at that time, there's no guarantee that we would be awarded a grant at all, or equally bad that we'd be awarded and waitlisted again. So it could be the mid to late 2030s before it would be completed, and the building as it exists now will not make it to that point. There are major repairs that are needed, some of which we've been postponing in anticipation of this grant. Some of those include replacement of the original single pane windows in the 1980 edition, the data and electrical infrastructure that is inadequate for our future needs. One of which, if you look around right now where you're sitting, normally we have tables in this area. There's not an outlet in sight. And you can follow mine. There happened to be one on that pillar, so I was able to plug in. We also need an upgrade to our Wi-Fi capabilities. In talking with Karen Henderson from Westborough TV, if we had a more robust Wi-Fi signal, we would be able to be broadcasting live tonight. But our Wi-Fi is not adequate for live broadcasts of library programs. That's something we would improve in the new building. We also have some structural issues with the chimneys and the foundation. Along with that, the slate roof on the 1908 building is now 114 years old, and slate roofs of that type have a lifespan of 100 to 120 years. So all of these issues will need to be addressed either piecemeal or as a whole, and they can't wait. We heard from about 300 residents on our community survey this winter and spring. They want this renovation to happen. There are so many stories in the comments of how grateful they were for library services during the COVID shutdown, during times when they needed information or when our resources helped them find jobs or file paperwork for benefits. We hear these stories all the time at the desk. People use the library as a way to stay connected with each other in many, many different ways. Our community deserves that kind of place, and now is the time to make that happen. We want to continue to make residents feel welcome in a building that will meet their needs for decades to come. So thank you for giving me a chance to share some project info. I'd be happy to answer questions or go back and review anything that you heard about.
Could you put the map up again, please?
The map of which?
The configuration of, for instance, where the children's room and the local history room will be.
Yeah. This is the upper level plan. So this is one possible configuration. We've already tweaked this a little bit, but what we're showing you here is that the children's room will be up on the top floor. Did you have a
Local history.
Local history also. Where is that?
So in our revised design that we've been working on, that I don't have the graphics for yet, we actually moved that down to the main floor into the space where the teen zone currently is, with the archive space to be built behind it, sort of where the circulation desk is now, and the upstairs to be used for quiet reading. We kind of flip-flopped the two of those. So the front historic building to be like the quieter space, and then the more active, louder spaces to be in the new addition.
Where would the teen room be?
Teen room would be in the lower level.
And the meeting room?
Meeting room actually will be on the main level. In the drawings that you saw here tonight, we had originally imagined that to be in the lower level, but we found a way that we could rearrange spaces and put the meeting room on the main level so that it would be usable after hours, and it could be closed off from the rest of the building so people could have access to the meeting room and restrooms and be able to have after hours meetings.
track of how many bathrooms there are going to be, but did you say 2 on each floor?
There will be at least 2 on each floor, yes.
Okay.
And the upstairs on the top floor, probably 3.
So I guess my question, in thinking about how long this takes to come to fruition, is whether or not you've talked about gender-neutral bathrooms. And
Yes.
Because if we put in bathrooms and then there comes a mandate where you need that, we'd be trying to reconfigure at that
Yeah.
point.
No, we specifically designed them to be one single person, one, and we're designing them as restrooms, kind of like what we have now downstairs. Just more of them and nicer. We hear about that on our surveys all the time too, how terrible the bathrooms are. And what you may or may not know, our custodian cleans our public restrooms twice a day. But people go in and because the tile is old and worn and we still have unrepaired damage from tile getting jackhammered. That's a whole other story I'll tell you later. It feels old and it feels like dirty, but he cleans, it's spotless, it's shining twice a day every time we're open. So we know that new and better bathrooms are strongly desired by the community. We heard loud and clear.
And space-wise, because it looks like, I mean, we're trying to get a lot in since you're limited to your footprint. The building committee decided we need 2 and maybe even 3 on the 3rd floor. Like, is it going to be better on the 3rd floor to just go with family bathroom on the 3rd floor?
So what they're picturing is
thinking about
is
like being able to
2.
use space for other things.
Yeah, they're picturing 2 towards the front of the building, so more for like the adults, and then a family restroom in the children's space. And that way, if a parent is there with their child, they're not sending them out of the children's room to go use the restroom. It's right within the department. So we think that's going to be a better solution, and it'll be large enough to accommodate a stroller or, and as I said, everything will be ADA compliant. So that will be helpful too.
I'm a relatively new addition to Westborough. My daughter and I, the first thing we did was sign up at the library, and we use the library at least twice a month. Right? We really love what you do here. We like the innovative things that you've done, the room of things, the electronic remote access is spectacular. Again, I really like what you've done. But what I'm seeing here is a 100-year-old library that was renovated 40 years ago, and not much is changing here. It's still basically a place of books. Right? Are there other things that we can imagine the library doing as a social centre of the town? I see the meeting rooms and so forth, and I understand that they'll be very useful for some people, but are there other things that we could layer onto that function of the library that's missing to sort of bring it, to make it capable of doing things for the next 40 or 100 years?
And did you want to answer that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Chris Allen, I was on the committee building the 40-year-ago new addition and also master plan. What Westborough needs and is in its master plan is a cultural center, like Hopkins,
Yes.
for plays, art galleries, art shows, all kinds of wonderful cultural types of activities going on where the community comes together. Westborough doesn't have that. Westborough needs that. That's in our master plan to be done. Having been a library trustee for many years, I love the library as a library. My mother was a librarian. I've worked in libraries, and I also have been involved in local history preservation. This is a beautiful building, and it is a library. But there's no doubt about it. Westborough needs a cultural center that will take the activities you're mentioning and make that part of our community. And that's one of our goals in the master plan.
So that's a separate issue that has been part of it. Appreciate it. Thanks.
And one of the other comments we heard in our community survey was about the number of people who are now working remotely and who need access to quiet space because they have
Dogs and children.
barking dogs, crying children. Yeah, and our addition of study rooms is something that people have been asking for as long as I've been here. That's been on every survey that we've done is please add study rooms, please add study rooms. And you know, COVID underscored the need for that with all the people working remotely. But our revised plan does take out a chunk of shelving because we were very heavy on shelving in this original iteration. And there is a lot more gathering space for people to come to work together, to study, to come in for the teens to hang out, and just as a comfortable, welcoming place that we don't expect you to buy anything. We want you to come in and spend the day if you want to.
And I noticed that too, like the amount of shelving that we have here is significantly reduced in the adult section, and the children's section, it's been expanded in terms of floor area, but if the shelves are lower, it probably hasn't been increased.
Right.
Is that an issue? Are either of those things an issue?
No, because there are things that we need to do as well. Our book collection is a little bit large for the size community that we serve, and we've been working hard on removing things that are not being used. In library terms, we call that weeding. When things are no longer of interest to the community and they're taking up valuable real estate, we remove those because we're constantly buying, and you can't keep constantly buying without sending someone their way. But we do need to downsize our book collection slightly, and yes, like in children's, if we have lower shelves, there are going to be more of them.
Is there a possibility across the whole CMARS collection of actually putting a more comprehensive warehouse of books that's accessible?
We actually have that now, not in one location, but just the ability that you have to request a book if it's not on our shelf. You have access to all of the 150 towns that are in the CW Mars network. So if we don't have it on hand, it's usually here within a couple days. It's not as fast as Amazon, but you also don't have to pay for it, and you can return it, and it's not cluttering up your house when you're done.
And you're not making billionaires rich, are you?
No, that is not our goal at all. Go ahead, Chris.
I just wondered, and maybe you covered it, in the children's room, are you going to have, what do they call them, when there's kids going through books like that?
The
Like they have in graphic
front-facing
design.
shelving, yeah.
So you, a little kid can stand up and do that and get the book they want.
Yeah, that's definitely in our plan because it's so much more it's like developmentally appropriate for kids to be able to do that, and it's such a great way for kids to browse the collection instead of looking at books that are standing there with this skinny little spine like this, seeing them facing front where they can look at the covers and kind of dig through. That will definitely be a feature in ours too.
What's it called?
We just call it front-facing shelving because
It's a new name.
the book is facing the front.
Other people call it teaching kids to judge a book by its cover.
Fair enough.
We always say don't do that, but you know, you can't help yourself. That's why cover art is beautiful. Well, I just want to thank you all again for coming, and I'll be around for a little while. Some of our trustees and building committee members are here and would be happy to answer questions for you as well. I plan to continue doing update kind of public forum events as we go along because there will be information changing. We'll eventually have new drawings to share with you and new information coming this summer. So definitely there will be other times before town meeting to learn more about the project. In the meantime, I do have some small handouts that I will pass around to everyone. If you know how to use a QR code, there's a QR code on it that will take you right to the building project webpage that is updated frequently. At any time I have new information about the project, it goes right on that page. So that's the most up-to-date place to get information about the project.
But one fundamental question. We've got a grant of $9.4 million that needs to be repaid.
No, the grant is a gift.
The grant's a gift,
Yep.
okay, but then there's 15 mil that goes on top. Where's that money coming from?
That would be what we're asking the town to approve at town meeting.
So it's $1,000 per resident, effectively, give or take.
Over the course of 20 years.
I mean, I remember being here for the groundbreaking of when we did this. I was like 9 or 10 years old when I remember it. And I'm just thinking back in recent memory, so thank you for doing this. We've had the town hall renovated, the police station, the fire station, 2 new schools, other schools renovated, while this building's been here for 40 years. So we all know the taxes here are tough, but it's time for the library, and I think that this kind of money coming to us, like you said, doesn't come around very often. So thanks for doing this, and I hope we get the support.
Hope so too.
Maureen, you might want to share, like you say, certain things are being evaluated now by the architect, specifically said changing where the location. I want to share that there's input coming not only from the survey, but the architect is entertaining your staff, and you get other information that's changing, from Massachusetts Library can share with you all these things. I mean, what you put together was an excellent job many years ago, but it's not stopping at that point to renovate and bring us up to a class 1 operation. A little more detail.
Yeah, and our designers have been really responsive to the input from staff and from the public. They read every one of the comments that we got on the survey and really took the input to heart and worked those suggestions into the next phase of design. And they'll continue to do that as we go through. So.
And we as I'm a trustee, and we as trustees, if there are people in the community, feel free to chat with us. You can find us online, and we'll share the same information back with Maureen. But she's always available, and we need more input from the community as we begin to finalize the budget.
Maureen, excuse me, who's the chair of the building committee?
The building committee chair is Ed Baldwin. He's not here tonight because he's driving home from Texas, dropping his daughter off at college. But our 2 of our building committee members are here, Bill Linane and Walter Leslie, and Karen Bay in the front is one of our library trustees as well. So feel free to chat with them as well. But thank you all.
Maureen,
for coming.
just one quick.
Yeah.
Is there any fear or an apprehension about the town's reaction to giving the money to the library? Is it something that people have to be organized to make sure that they go to that meeting? Or is it a done deal? Like, okay, they're really happy with us and they're just going to do it.
It's definitely not a done deal. So our hope is that all of you who are here will come to town meeting and bring a friend or 20 and make sure that you come and vote. It's definitely not a done deal. And we've been talking about the project for so long that we have had people coming in even this summer asking, when's the construction going to start? And we keep telling them as soon as you vote for it, because they think that we've already voted on it, and we have not. So until we vote on it, and unless it's approved, and town meeting requires a 2/3 majority for approval for a project like this. So October 17th.
Because it's a borough.
Because it's a borough, yeah. So October 17th, it's a date with all of you. I'll be there. All right. Thank you all.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point.